Explosions over Tehran, not rumors, not speculation, not a warning. Just after midnight, residents across the Iranian capital reported flashes across the skyline. Then came the shockwaves, windows rattled, car alarms screamed across entire districts, anti-aircraft batteries opened fire into the darkness, streaks of tracer rounds cutting through the night sky. For nearly 20 minutes, the city that houses almost 10 million people sounded like a battlefield. And then something unusual happened. The air defenses stopped, because according to multiple early intelligence briefings circulating among Western and regional defense analysts this morning, the strikes that hit Iran overnight may have degraded as much as 86% of the country's active air defense network. If that number holds, it represents one of the most significant military setbacks Iran has experienced in decades, but the explosions themselves are not the real story. The real story is the question those explosions raise, because if Iran's air defenses are now severely degraded, what happens next? If the shield that protects the country's most sensitive military infrastructure has been punctured, the entire strategic balance of the region shifts overnight, and that is exactly why the next few minutes of this video matter, because the strike happened, the damage assessment is now underway. And what military planners believe may come next could define the next phase of this conflict. Stay with us, because what we're looking at may not be a single strike event, it may be the opening move of something far larger. Let's start with what we actually know so far. Shortly after midnight local time, multiple explosions were reported across several military zones surrounding Tehran. Residents in districts on the western and southern edges of the capital posted footage showing flashes in the sky, followed by the sound of interceptors launching, regional monitoring groups that track military activity across the Middle East confirmed what appeared to be a coordinated wave of precision strikes targeting radar installations and air defense batteries. These are not random targets, they form the backbone of Iran's integrated air defense network, a layered system designed over decades to detect and intercept incoming aircraft and missiles. Satellite imagery analysts reviewing early post-strike images suggest several key radar stations may have been disabled within minutes of the attack, and this is where the situation becomes strategically significant, because Iran's defensive architecture relies heavily on overlapping radar coverage. If enough of those nodes are destroyed or blinded, the entire system begins to lose coherence. That means incoming aircraft or missiles may be able to operate with far less resistance than before, which brings us to the second data point analysts are focusing on this morning. According to preliminary defense assessments circulating among US and European security officials, the strikes may have targeted high-value command nodes controlling Iran's air defense grid. Those nodes act as the central nervous system of the network, disable them, and individual missile batteries become isolated. In other words, the defenses are still there, but they are no longer coordinated, and that distinction matters enormously, because an uncoordinated air defense system is dramatically easier to overwhelm. Now here is where the strategic picture begins to shift. For decades, Iran has invested billions into building a defensive shield designed specifically to prevent foreign air forces from operating freely over its territory. Russian-supplied S-300 systems, domestically produced Bava R-373 missile batteries, hundreds of radar installations spread across mountain ranges and deserts, all designed to create a layered barrier, a barrier that military planners believed would make large-scale air operations against Iran extremely difficult. Yet what we may have just witnessed suggests that barrier can be degraded far faster than many analysts expected. And that raises the question almost nobody in breaking news coverage is addressing yet. If Iran's air defense network is truly down by 86%, what becomes vulnerable next? Because air defenses are not the final target in modern warfare, they are the gatekeepers. Once the gatekeepers are removed, the targets behind them become exposed: missile production facilities, military command centers, fuel depots, ballistic missile launch complexes, strategic research installations. All of them become dramatically easier to reach, which is why the next 48 to 72 hours may prove decisive. Military analysts often describe conflicts like this as unfolding in phases. Phase 1 is suppression of air defenses. Phase 2 is gaining operational air superiority. Phase 3 is sustained strikes on strategic infrastructure. If the numbers emerging this morning are even partially accurate, the first phase may already be nearing completion, and that possibility is forcing governments across the region to reassess the situation in real time, because once air superiority begins to shift, escalation risks increase dramatically. But here is the strategic twist that makes this situation far more complicated than a simple military success story. A country that loses a large portion of its defensive shield does not necessarily become passive. Sometimes the opposite happens, because when military planners believe their defensive capacity is collapsing, they may feel pressure to escalate before their remaining capabilities disappear, and history shows that moment the moment. When a state believes its window of deterrence is closing is often the most dangerous phase of a conflict, which leads us directly to the next question. If Iran's air defense network has truly taken a catastrophic hit, how might Iran respond? Defense analysts generally outline three possible pathways from here. The first scenario is containment. In this scenario, Iran absorbs the damage and avoids immediate escalation. Remaining air defense assets are repositioned. Military infrastructure is hardened. Diplomatic channels quietly begin working behind the scenes to prevent the conflict from expanding further. Governments across Europe would strongly prefer this outcome, but it is not the only possibility. The second scenario is prolonged attrition. Rather than responding with a dramatic escalation, Iran could shift toward a slower strategy designed to stretch the conflict over time that might involve proxy networks across the region. Groups operating in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, or Yemen could become more active, spreading the pressure across multiple fronts. In that scenario, the battlefield expands geographically, even if the intensity of direct strikes remains limited. But there is also a third scenario, and it is the one military planners worry about most: escalation. If Iran's leadership concludes that its conventional defensive shield has been severely compromised, it may calculate that waiting only increases its vulnerability. In that case, decision-makers might choose to act while they still retain significant offensive capabilities. That could mean missile strikes, cyber operations, or actions targeting regional energy infrastructure, which is why the next phase of this story is not just about Tehran, it is about the entire region.